Hi, my name is Leah Day, and welcome to Quilt Along number 34. It's a brand new month and time to learn a new family of designs. And this month we're going to tackle edge-to-edge designs, and these designs work wonderfully in the sashing of any quilt. And just so happens we're working on a quilt with a lot of sashing. So let's get on the Batik Beauty quilt and see how this works in free motion.
So let's get started with flowing lines. We're working from edge to edge. So this is an edge, and down here along this block this is the opposite edge. And I'm just going to stitch right across the space. And for flowing lines, that's exactly what we're going to stitch. Just a long flowing line. Now I'm going to travel stitch along this stitched in the ditch edge and come up and echo that flowing line. As I stitch that, I'm just visually estimating my space so that way I maintain that 1/2 inch seam scale, 1/2 inch between those lines of stitching. And that's consistent with the other stitching I've put in this quilt. And I roll up the quilt just a little bit so I can move it easily. So flowing lines is stitched by first stitching some just wiggly lines on your quilt, and then you have something called a gap line, and that's you're going to travel stitch and then branch off to create a pocket or a gap within those lines. So that's what I'm going to do next. Now I'm going to travel stitch the rest of the way down and then across to come up with another flowing line across the place. Now if this was a longer area, so let's say I was stitching actually from like maybe down here to down here, I would put in several gaps like this. I wouldn't just do a single one. I would branch out and do several all in one line. But then the next step is always to do a line of echoing. And really it's entirely up to you how often you put the gap lines in. It really doesn't matter how often you put them in. The more you put them in, the more open your quilt is going to look, the more gaps are going to be noticeable. The fewer gaps that you put in, the more kind of straight lines and graphic the texture is going to be. So just kind of play with it and see which way you like best. Another way to form a gap is to travel stitch out along the stitched in the ditch section or whatever edge you're working off of. Stitch out and then come in and reconnect with your lines. So let's see how that works. Now I'm going to branch out. Stitch it down. And now I'm going to branch out again and reconnect with the opposite side. And again, travel stitch and come up with another line that's echoing the last. Now this time, rather than doing a gap line next, I'm going to go on ahead and do another echo just to give myself a little space. Another cool thing to play with is changing the width of your echo. So I'm going to also play with that. And you might be worrying that this will get a little dense. It won't get dense unless you keep everything very, very tight together. So long as you're keeping everything generally far apart, you can get a little closer every once in a while, and that's okay. So this time I'm going to kind of cut that echo in half. See what that looks like. See, it almost created kind of a stripe down that section. It's kind of neat looking. one thing that you can keep in mind is that gap lines are easier to form when you start them from the top working down, so that way you can see where you're going. Notice that I haven't formed any gaps starting from here and going up, simply because this part of my machine is in the way and I can't really see where I'm going, and I might not be able to reconnect with this line. So I'm always forming the gap lines coming down the piece, basically stitching the way you would stitch normally through the machine. So let's do another gap. Travel stitch and echo again. The more flowy and freeform these gaps are, the more interesting the texture will be. Don't hesitate to really veer out and do something crazy, because that'll actually look really good. If you want a more controlled texture, you can just keep kind of more of bubble shapes or teardrop shapes. Something more rounded will look a little different from these kind of real organic wibbly wobbly shapes. Alright, let's see, let's travel stitch over and do another gap line. I'm going to just stitch some and let you hear the machine and how it adjusts for speed, and which areas are slow and which areas are fast. I've reached the end of this section, and so my edges are no longer here, although there is still a seam right here that I could continue to follow in. I can do a lot of different things design-wise here. I could kind of start running down along these blocks and extend that flowing lines design. I could kind of somehow curve around. I think that's what I'm going to attempt to do, because I'm going to work more edge-to-edge designs down here. So I'm just going to create kind of a curve here and down here to get across this sashing area and make it look really pretty. So let's do that next. I'm just going to stitch kind of an organic curve on this side, hit that line, and then travel stitch back. And the way to know what this is going to look like is to maybe mark it or spend some time sketching it on your quilt. That way, that will give you an idea of what this will look like, so it's not just totally winging it. Alright, now we're going to do a gap line here. I'm going to come all the way down to this point and form that other sashing barrier. Other side, and then come around. Okay, I'm going to travel stitch back over. Form a few more gaps and a few more echoes. So there you have it. This is the edge-to-edge design flowing lines stitched on the Batik Beauty quilt.
So that's it for this video. I really hope you'll get on your machine and pick a quilt and give this flowing lines design a try. It's actually not very challenging. Just concentrate on making a really nice wiggly line and then making those echoes and gap lines consistently across the space. Of course, if you have any questions or comments about this video, make sure to post them to the Free Motion Quilting Project. If you stitch out the design, also link up with us, share your progress, show how you've stitched it, how you've interpreted this design on your quilts, and share with everyone else online. You can find all of that and more at freemotionproject.com. Until next time, let's go quilt.